This is Mainstream Metaphysics with your host, Nick Newmont.
Well, hello. Welcome to Mainstream Metaphysics. It is a Wednesday night in a very hot and sunny Southern California. Hi there. I'm Nick Newmont. Welcome to the show. Glad you are here. I'm good to be here. Glad to be here. Good to be here. It is good to be here. It's nice and cool in the studios. Behind the scenes back there, that is Ed Hunt taking care of everything. And tonight's show is really about, a follow-up on some very special planetary alignments that have been going on, and some of which have been talked about and some are not. And there's some things tonight that I want to clear up and address so that you understand these things better, especially within the realm of the chart of the United States. And it's things that are going to have an impact on all of us, things that we really want to take a look at. And I'm going to do my best to explain them in everyday English. Because when I say these things, people ask, well, what does that mean? And that's really the best question is, what does that mean? So there's been all this buzz up and down social media and the internet about the Barbo basket. And it is a very rare alignment. And I'll show the illustrations as we go, as it involves Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. And it's a very rare alignment. It's a generational alignment. It's something that we, in our lifetime have never experienced. And as this passes, we won't experience it again. And so as I put it down on top of the other ones, I'm going to show this briefly, then go back to the other things that I'm going to talk about. So you can go ahead and show that. All right, so I did this with two colors. So what you see in yellow, this is Pluto opposing Jupiter, and then Jupiter sextiling Uranus, Uranus sextiling Neptune, and Neptune sextiling Pluto. So that is the basket. And when you have rare alignments, and they are the major planets that are involved, the transcendental planets, then we have Jupiter thrown in there too. This is very powerful. Now, what is the orange that I brought in? Well, and these are alignments that I talked about 2 weeks ago on the show, and I individualized, Pluto trining Uranus, and then Jupiter trining Neptune. So these are very important because now this looks like a support system or the weave of the basket. So we really look at all these, but the true basket itself is these 4 points: Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Jupiter. Now, before we go to that, and why am I teasing? Well, because in the chart of the U.S., at the same time that we have the basket going on, and you can see without the lines, there's Jupiter, there's Uranus, there's Neptune, there's Pluto. But what is this orange line that I'm looking at? Well, this is Saturn in the sky opposing the natal Saturn in the chart of the United States. And this has its own connotation, and it's not to be taken lightly, because whenever we're talking about reality, Saturn is, yes, karma, fate, destiny, lessons learned. It rules the 10th house in astrology, public life. And in the chart of the United States, the natal chart, the country is born with Saturn in the 10th house. So it means that Saturn is at home in the chart of the United States. So this tells us that the United States is a leader, to the world. And we know that. We've seen it. We live it. But what happens when Saturn is in alignment with Saturn? Well, we have to take that backwards for a bit. And we're going to go all the way back to, see the date here, December 3rd, 2010. Well, why am I going backwards? Well, when you look here, this is the perfect alignment of Saturn to Saturn. 14 degrees, 48 minutes. So this is called a Saturn return. And we all have them. It happens approximately 29 years. So it's an important aspect to have in your chart, because as a person you get it around between 29 and 30, then between 59 and 60, and then once again, if you're old enough, somewhere around 86, 87 years old, 88. And the reason I put all this work into this is because the Saturn return is either a level up or a level down. And when you are 29 years old, much younger than the United States, you have a tendency to step into maturity. Saturn represents obstacles, yes, karma, yes, but also there's a certain level of wisdom that comes with Saturn. And if I've said many times that if I had my way, I wouldn't let a person get married until their first Saturn return, because that's when they truly get to know themselves. And because Saturn represents your public life, the thing I like about the first Saturn return is that we sort of roll up our sleeves and are ready to take on the world and see where we're going to take our, especially career, because that's what Saturn is, your public life and career, your reputation, your aptitude towards success. So the reason we look at this in the chart of the United States is because at the Saturn return in maturity, there's a level up or a level down. Now, for you as a person, when you get to your second Saturn return around 59 or 60, which ironically is approaching retirement age. In fact, as you know, if you live in the United States at age 59 and a half, that's when you can start to collect qualified money out of your retirement plan. So it's an interesting, curiosity about that age and what Saturn is doing. So the way I want you to understand the second Saturn return is that, remember the old-fashioned department stores that had the escalators, multi-level stores? Well, if you take the down escalator, which goes into the bargain basement from the first floor, then you go into sort of a retiring mentality. And I recall when I studied this with my teacher way back when, the way he worded this was, so if you take the down escalator, you go into a very retiring mentality, and then you end up comparing what meds you're on with your contemporaries. It's a very abysmal path to take. But if you take the up escalator around age 59, then you sign up for a new karmic contract. You're taking on new challenges where you want to take your life up into more of an evolution as opposed to a de-evolution. Well, so the Saturn return is a big decision that we all make. Well, in the country, in 2010, in December of 2010, when the country had a Saturn return, the decisions that were made by leaders, and Saturn is authority figures, governmental leaders, and so the country experienced a downturn. The chart. So what happens in the chart of the United States has a huge effect on what happens to we citizens. So this downturn occurred, and it took the productivity of the country way down. In fact, For those of you that remember that time, there were tons of foreclosures. People who were self-employed were suffering. There was less disposable income. So if it was necessity, it was paid for and bought. If it was a luxury, then people set that aside. So this was a very challenging time to have at that point. And it challenges relationships. When you look at the chart, the United States does a lot in terms of 8th house things, which are investments, things that pay off. And Saturn prior to that, and then with retrograde, was squaring the sun, which is very stressful. It puts some stress, pressure, and a challenge to the vitality of holdings that we would have. All right, so it wasn't good. Then what happens is, and I didn't run a chart on that, then 7 years later, the Saturn squares Saturn, which means that's decision time. When Saturn squares Saturn, that means that there is some kind of roadblock that is formed that causes you to take a time out and assess things and look at what's working and what's not working. Then we start to move forward in time. And the chart that I ran now on the United States is January 30th of 2019. All right, this is what I want you to look at. This is where Saturn is now at 15 degrees of Capricorn and gaining speed on Pluto. Now, it is at that time that astrologers were already looking at, what 2020 was going to be like, because we all knew that there was going to be a major alignment in early 2020 with a cluster of planets in Capricorn and the exact alignment of Saturn and Pluto, and that Saturn and Pluto don't conjunct each other but every 37 to 38 years. Well, when we track back in time and we look at this, every time Saturn and Pluto, and it doesn't matter what sign they're in, would align, there were difficulties, financial hardships, and problems. And the fun thing about, horary astrology, predictive astrology based on real events, is that you can look forward and you can look backwards, especially with the sophisticated astrology programs that we have on our computers now. You can look at just about anything, way back or way down the road. So this was already telling us that we were going to have problems in the year ahead. And look, it's in the second house. And what is the second house in astrology? Where you earn your money, possessions, intrinsic values. This meant that the value, what people deemed important and essential in life, was going to face challenging times. All right, now we fast forward again. Now we take it to January 20th of 2020. And look at this. We have Jupiter at 9 degrees of Capricorn, the Sun at almost 22 degrees of Capricorn, then Saturn at 22 plus of Capricorn, exactly on top of Pluto at 2246 of Capricorn. And this was 6:59 a.m. on the West Coast, January 12th, 2020. And so what was already in play at this time? COVID. So we knew that things were not going to be good. It was a matter of degree of how unpleasant and how challenging it was going to be. And at this time, you can see Jupiter, Sun, Saturn, Pluto, and Mercury all in Capricorn at the same time. And when you get Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn on top of each other, that is cold, that is I don't care, and that is the feeling that we had coming from authority figures, governmental figures, leaders. So we knew at this point that this was going to be rough. Now, understand something. that when major planets align, it takes a while for them to build and come together. And it takes a while that even when the planets start to separate, that the tone, when you're dealing with major planets that move slowly, like Uranus stays in a house or a sign 7 to 8 years. Neptune can be in there anywhere from 11 to 14 years. And Pluto can be in a sign or a house anywhere from 14 to at least 21 years. Because Pluto basically moves 3 steps forward, 2 steps back over a year. It moves basically 1.5 degrees from year to year to year. So with this involved, we knew that this wasn't something that was going to be, a snap, go away, and everything is all good again. We knew that this was going to be long-lasting, and of course, that this was happening in the area of money, finance, and intrinsic values. And at the same time, these planets that are in Capricorn were forming oppositions to the Cancerian planets natally in the chart of the United States in terms of agreements, partnerships, and investments. So this was very polarizing. Here's Pluto opposing Mercury. Here's Saturn opposing Mercury and the part of fortune. So this was extremely stressful for people in this country to have this happen because it was hitting them right in the wallet. And then, of course, I didn't run the chart of 2024, but Pluto moved forward, and for the first time in 249 years, we had a Pluto return in the House of Finance. And this was the beginning of the tearing down and the rebuilding of finance in this country. This was the beginning of people taking things seriously that were not traditional money, because Capricorn is very traditional. And you'll see in a little bit, as I show the charts, that Pluto is in Aquarius, which is the break from the norm. So Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, all traditional things, big business, government. Aquarius, non-traditional, because Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. So that was the break. And of course, Aquarius rules all the things that people are interested in now, like crypto and all those things that are not traditional money. So this began the beginning of the breakdown of the old way of handling money, the Pluto return. And what's funny, for those of you that follow me and know that I channel Merlin, it'll be a good 10 years now, I was channeling Merlin, and Merlin told the audience that everything regarding finance and money, that the systems are moving too fast, and things are done fast. And he said the money, of the United States of America, the financial systems, is old machinery, and it's moving so fast it's breaking. And that's the way he worded it. So now we know what he meant looking at this. This was the breaking away of the old system and moving into the new system with the Pluto return. And of course, a Pluto return can only happen every 248, every 249 years. So we witness something happen, that normally we wouldn't see happen. So it's amazing to actually see and witness that. Now, so what about this, where we sit now? The Saturn opposition. So 14, we go back to 2010, we had the Pluto return. Then we had the Pluto square, and now we have the Pluto opposition. So what do we do with this? Well, the Pluto opposition, I said Pluto opposition, sorry about that. The Saturn opposition. So the Saturn opposition is where we get into a karmic review. And the way I learned this was, if you are a person and you have a Saturn opposition, again around age 14, around age 44, again around age 73. It's as if the universe gets you by the scruff of the neck and puts your face in the mirror and says, do you like what you see? Now, if you don't like what you see, you flip out. But if you like what you see, then you flip in. You get into more of the good that's going on. And you can become very busy, very productive. I remember when I was that age and had my Saturn opposition, I knew I was where I was supposed to be, and everything with me, especially in terms of business, really took off and went in a very powerful direction. And as I was aligned, really aligned in my karma at that point, which would take me back to around age 44, which, by the way, incidentally, was around the time that I met Audrey. I didn't just get busy in my business. It's around the time I met her, give or take time, but it was close enough. So in other words, I recognized who I was where I was supposed to be, and doing really, according to Saturn's karmic effect, I was where I was supposed to be at that point in time. I don't know that I ever told Audrey that either. I know she's watching the show. So that'll be an interesting discussion when I go home later on. Let me look at comments here. Yes. Hi, Audrey, Becca, and Stephanie Sakamoto. Good to have you on and watching. Thank you. All right, so what is, in the chart of the U.S., Saturn is in the 4th house, which is the people, private life, security. Saturn is opposing Saturn in the 10th house, which is public life. So with this means that how the country, because of this chart of the country, the reaction that we're going to have to this dependent on how Saturn has behaved in the chart of the country in those times I talked about, roughly about 9 years ago, and then again roughly 14 years ago, back to 2010. So this is a time when people do make changes. And what this represents, the Saturn opposition, is facing reality and looking at what needs to be adjusted at this point. And I've said to many clients through the years that if you called me on the phone and said, Nick, I'm in a panic, I just have a minute, can you look at my chart? I would look and see where Saturn is in your chart, because that is the reality and the focus of the moment, not the other fast-moving planets. This is where we need to put our focus and attention. So this means that there is an area of increased responsibility. You're going to have very good evidence that what you're doing is either working or not working. If things were, it wouldn't catch you by surprise. Okay, it's not like Uranus where it just pops in and all of a sudden there it is. When things are working out well, this would represent a material peak in your life. This is who I am. This is what I am. And of course, when we talk about Saturn representing karma, well, that is actions and consequences. In this case, these would be good consequences. But in the challenge of the Saturn return back in 2010, the Saturn opposition is the opportunity to correct or right the things that happened back then that went wrong. And that's what we're seeing right now. And that's why this Saturn opposition is occurring at the time of Barbeau's basket, because this is a major correction. Now, when I say the word correction to stockbrokers, they are going to go into panic. What do you mean there's going to be a correction? I don't mean that kind of correction. I mean a righting of the past. The ship that tipped over back in 2010 has been righting all the time. It's being pulled back up and it's becoming seaworthy again. That's what I mean by this. And remember, when we go back to a year ago at this time, when it was the beginning of the alignment with Saturn and Neptune, which is the great reveal. This alignment of Saturn-Neptune hit this past mid-February. This is something that continues. Again, I'm going to repeat myself, that when major planets align, just because they move a few degrees away, it doesn't mean that what they set in motion isn't still occurring. So the positive effect of Saturn and Neptune creating more and more reveals as to what's really been going on under the surface is continuing. And with Saturn opposing Saturn, it means the people have spoken. So what does this mean at this point? Well, as Merlin loves to say, that the villagers are about to storm the castle, but not in terms of like storming, capitals in Washington, D.C. or every state capital. This means that there is going to be this level of enlightenment where people rise up and become to realize the reality that is going on, and anyone that is seen as some form of a wrongdoer will be exposed or called out. That's what this is all about. And this Saturn opposition, because this Saturn represents big business, government, world leaders, this is the part that I want you to hear, because again, this is the chart of the United States. This is an adjustment of relationships. Folks, don't be surprised with the Saturn opposition if the United States doesn't change some of its alliances as to who we were aligned with can change into being unaligned and realigning with others. Pay close attention to this. And the reason that is going to go on for a while, because once we get deeper into this month, today is July 22nd, once we get to Mercury going direct, which is, by the way, basically tomorrow, and then Saturn goes retrograde between the 26th and the 27th, and I will affirm that in a moment. Saturn will back up. See, it's hardly budged. This Saturn opposition is just really and truly spot on, to itself. Once it backs up, it's going to lock in to the Saturn opposition really tight. So basically, the rest of this month, Saturn is opposing Saturn until it retrogrades enough so it comes off of it. But then, as we get down the road and we get into, I believe it's November, December, then Saturn is going to turn around, and that the retrograde and then direct, the Saturn opposition is going to reoccur. Okay? It's going to reoccur, and it will continue retrograde until December the 10th. All right? So we're going to get the Saturn opposition again next late winter, early spring. So this won't be done. So this means to us, the Saturn opposition means from now until early 2027, we will be reviewing who our allies are. So very, very fascinating, very, very powerful that this is going on right in the middle as we're experiencing Barbo's basket. Okay? All right. Now, so here's the basket again, and where in the past I've used yellow and orange, I was having a little funny moment with myself because this is going to have a prolific effect on money and finance. So I drew it in red and green. So it's Christmas in July. Yep. I had to do that, right? So Pluto in the house of money of the United States is opposing Jupiter in the house of investments of the United States. The Pluto-Jupiter opposition, even without the rest of the basket, is hugely powerful, because this is going to be very, very transformational in regards to money and finance and how we handle money going forward. Pluto is in Aquarius. This is all changes, a break from the past, a break from the norm, and everything that we have talked about in terms of crypto and all this stuff that's done electronically. This is going to create quite an impact on how we do things. See, with Jupiter opposing Pluto, and it's right here, okay? We can be very ambitious, feeling that if we set our sights high enough, we can achieve anything, because Jupiter is optimism. However, if we tread a little lightly, it may not come as organically. So we don't want to stir up too much opposition, okay? This will flow if we just let it flow. We don't want to bring the ego into play, especially with Pluto and Jupiter involved. So we don't want to exaggerate. We don't want to take on too many different things. We might find that something might challenge our belief system. This can create a major attitude change, or we might have to face some narrow-mindedness in others or ourselves. So this also is when we would feel a tremendous pressure to succeed or take on or go after a goal where we could make mistakes or exercise poor judgment. So what do you do with this when I put it like that? Well, you don't become fanatical with Pluto and Jupiter. You know, there are aspects of Pluto and Jupiter in a person's chart where it's referred to as the kingmaker. So it's powerful. And with Jupiter in the sign of Leo for deep into the fall of 2027, this creates this sort of freedom-seeking quality in us. Leo is all about going for the top, and with as of yesterday, Jupiter formed a true sextile with Uranus. There it is. And so Jupiter again in the house of investments, sextiling Uranus in the house of health and day-to-day work. And so with Uranus in there, this means that jobs are being created. New jobs all the time are going to be created as a result of this. Industries are going to be invented. New things will come out. With Uranus, everything is about technology. Gemini is things in communications. So, there's a lot to look forward to with this. And that's one of the major sides of the basket. All right. So, then, in the next couple days, Neptune, and this is basically the 25th, is moving and forming the sextile to Pluto. And this is many, many, many aspects that were going to come, because Neptune and Pluto will be sextiling each other all the way until, because it takes so long for them to move, they'll be in major aspect to each other all the way until February leap year of 2032. So this is huge. So the reason I point that out is that when the internet and social media is blowing up about as of tomorrow the Barbo basket doesn't really exist anymore, and there's a lot of emphasis on all these planets being at 4+ degrees. But it doesn't end. It doesn't end there. This is something that is set in motion. Pluto is inevitability. When Pluto is in motion, it creates inertia. And you're talking about planetary inertia. And inertia is an object in motion tends to stay in motion. So you've got the 3 transcendental planets plus Jupiter creating game-changing landmark events on the planet that have never been seen before. So you have to expect the unexpected. With this, expect a miracle, and your mindset has got to be beyond what you expect to be the norm. If you take yourself in a time like this, because this is a major gateway, this is a major portal, if you say, oh, nothing's going to happen, then it won't happen for you. If your mindset is that you expect the best and you are setting things in motion, that you believe miracles come true, then incredible things will happen for you. This is a time of beginnings, because at 4 degrees in each one of those signs that trine and sextile each other, that is the beginning of a decant in astrology. And that's very technical. I'm not going to explain that. Every sign has 3 decants to it. It's basically every 10 days in a sign. Okay? But I should do a whole show on decants. So this that's being set in motion right now is going to also create in us the ability to see and witness things that are improbable. You're going to see things, especially with money. Now, I find it ironic that this formation by Barbeau was referred to as a basket, and that's a great description. But in terms of very high finance, advanced finance, especially in terms of foreign global affairs and currencies, that there's a reference about the basket, what's in the basket. And when this came about, for me, I think that's not coincidence. It's a bit of cosmic irony that we're looking at events that are about to happen with global finance that are unprecedented. And so here's the basket in the sky and on paper. The baskets are about to get filled, and you want to be in position to have your basket filled. When you continue to look, Uranus, in terms of work, is sextiling Neptune in the area of 4th house, people, home life, family. That's the moon house. That's the Cancer house. That's where we find our security. So people's psyches are going to flow. People are going to tune in and be very sensitive to what's happening. Neptune is sextiling Pluto. Now we have money, transformation of money into security at the same time. So things are going to happen. Pluto, Neptune, these are things behind the scenes that aren't going to be so obvious, that are set in motion, not going to. They are set in motion at this point. Then we have Pluto, which supports the basket, forming a trine, a 120-degree angle, over to Uranus. So this is evolution and revolution supporting each other. This is another form of the inevitability. 2nd house money, 6th house work. Okay? Now, I want to explain this. Because Uranus is all about revolution and freedom seeking, and it's in Gemini, which means the people have spoken. The 6th house is also known as the house of subservience. In other words, people are about to be set free. That's how huge this is. Then we have Neptune trining to Jupiter. So here's the area of our security flowing into Jupiter at what our holdings are. All right? This is a form of spiritual advancement, because the 8th house isn't just other people's money, investments, settlements, unearned money. It's the house of mysticism and ritual. It's the house of the occult. It's the house where everything that's secret and hidden lies. And with Neptune and Jupiter there, this is going to bring that grand undercurrent of what's been flowing underground, what's been hidden, up to the surface where it's visible. So all 4 of these planets are playing off of each other simultaneously. This is a huge amount of energy. So when you look at this on paper, I mean, these planets on paper are only an amount of inches from each other. And so that gives us, a perspective of, oh, okay, I see it on paper. But these planets are millions of miles away from each other, but they are held together by the physics of the universe, meaning that there is a magnetic pull. And when they align with each other, they are communicating with each other, and what each planet represents cosmically, universally. So these planets are magnetized to each other, signaling to each other these aspects that I've been describing, and this sets this in motion. So this is a form of a gateway, a portal that's in the cosmos that's activating very benevolent things right now. People could ask, what's the downside? There is no downside. With Jupiter involved, you can overdo it. There is a level of overindulgence and overkill where Jupiter's involved, but not in a situation like this. Jupiter brings optimism, benevolence. Pluto makes us or makes things become what we need to become. You can't stop Pluto. Neptune brings our psyche into play. It allows us to see the illusion, and that illusion becomes reality. Uranus breaks from the past. So when you take all that separately and add that together, this is one of the most magnificent aspects that we will have. Everybody watching, everybody that sees this, it's not going to happen again in your lifetime. And it's been a long time since it's happened. And just like when Saturn and Pluto aligned, in 2020, and that carried for years, the negative effect of that, the best news that I'm going to give you tonight is that this is the antithesis of the January 2020 alignment of Pluto and Capricorn and all those planets in Capricorn. This forgives it all. This is taking all those dark, stressful days and bringing this up to the surface. Where that was the dark, this is the light. And it doesn't stop in the next couple days. This is going to continue for some time to come. And once this is set in motion, and it is set in motion, this momentum will continue to unveil and reveal and bring about very positive things in terms of people's lives. Money, investments. Like, for instance, back when, in 2010, when Saturn aligned with Saturn, that was the beginning of the collapse of the housing industry at that time. And I think those of you back then remember 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. That was rough. In LA County, people's property values dropped as much as 50%. Now, what this is going to do, because 4th house is your home, 8th house is your holdings, this is going to lift housing. So this is extremely positive. And the other thing about Jupiter in the 8th house, and you're going to love this, banks cooperate. In your own personal chart, if Jupiter's transiting your 8th house and you need money, banks are going to say yes. That's an extremely positive aspect to have in your chart. So this is the change of how the banks treat people. Uranus is sextiling Jupiter. Pluto is opposing Jupiter. So anything that we've seen as of uncooperation or harshness from banks, from lending institutions, this is the beginning of the end of them controlling the way they've controlled. This is where we get cooperation. So, again, this is in the chart of the country, so it's the theme that the country will experience. If you want to know where this basket sits in your chart, this is a great time to have a reading, because wherever it is, it's going to be benevolent. And there you see my number, 818-865-8770. We were joking before the show, operators standing by. No, operators are not standing by. That phone is in my briefcase at the moment. Ed's back there laughing. I'm thrilled about this. I mean, I've seen some positive aspects. And quite frankly, I have been looking. I was up this morning before around 5 o'clock on the computer reading, putting together charts, because I'm really looking forward to presenting this tonight. Because it's good news. There isn't any bad news in this. And if it's challenging, like I said, before the 4th of July, we had a Uranus-Mars conjunction in Gemini, and I warned, be careful where you go in terms of big groups of people, and there was unrest and problems in certain areas. I'll tell you what I see along the way. This is only good. Of course, it would look a little different in your chart, depending on what your rising sign is. So I encourage you to call me and get a reading and find out, where you stand in regards to the most beneficial planetary alignment of the century. Really is. It's the century. And I've been having a lot of fun reading people's charts and showing them where that is and what to expect from this. You just have to run outside and with your basket and catch whatever's falling. But it's going to be good stuff. My sense with this being a little more specific, I think we're going to see major changes in terms of currencies, finance, more of a global cooperation, how currencies align and revalue, and the issue of the tariffs that have been in place for a while gets balanced out, and there's a lot more global equilibrium financially. That's what I'm seeing happening with this. And it's more of a, I guess you could almost call it a global currency as opposed to individual country currencies. But the individual country currencies aren't going to go away. That's not going to happen. But we will see much more equilibrium. And this is going to benefit a lot of people, as this happens going forward. I knew from, a while ago that the last 2 weeks of July were going to be very prolific. It's caught everyone's attention. Again, you go on, social media. A lot of people are writing about this, and it's not a bunch of woo-woo stuff that's very fluffy. This is the real deal. This is something that we embrace. We know our realities are going to change with this in a really good way, and expect the best. Just don't become fanatical about with these, and don't go out on your own and change your life completely. Let this happen to you. Don't go quit your job or something like that. you want to be in a place of abundance, benevolence, and also from now be in a place of gratitude and appreciation, because the universe is going to drop this right in your lap, and we will see it. And I would like to say in the next couple months, as I'm doing this podcast, that there will be evidence of what's happening, that we'll be able to say in a really good way, I told you so. I'm seeing already evidence of this happening, and there'll be a lot more of it. On a roll, and I still have 8 minutes. By the way, as I'm thinking about it, I better say this: I will not be on next week. I have plans that were in place for me from months ago, but I will be back on Wednesday, August 5th. I think 2 weeks from tonight is August 5th. And I will have a guest. My guest is trainer and runner Brandon Fravel, my buddy, and who I train with. And we are going to talk about seasonal training. When the temperature changes, how do you accommodate that kind of training to do in each of the seasons? He is going to focus a lot on training in hot weather, because it's only 95 degrees outside, right? It's supposed to be really hot Thursday and Friday here in SoCal. So drink lots of water, take care of yourself. And we're also going to talk about motivation, and how to get inspired, the intentions to set when it comes to training toward results, so that you don't start something and then feel like I don't want to do this anymore. Having realistic goals. He and I have talked about this on Tuesday morning in one of my training sessions. I work with him, and he gets results. I like working with him. He's a good guy, knows what he's doing, especially men. And even though he's a lot younger than me, he understands mature men, their conditions, and how to get the best out of them. So tune in 2 weeks. I think I've just about talked myself out. So I hope I have explained this in such a way that it was understandable, digestible. I'm really excited, and I look forward to what the good things that are going to happen. And when I say the good things, they're innumerable. I think the possibilities of what this represents and what it presents, it just breaks down the door and the walls of any limitation that has been going on for some time, along with the country having a Saturn opposition, which is a review of where we are and what we're going to do to move forward. And all of this, it does involve reassessing allies and how we as a planet and a society are going to cooperate much better going forward. And this also can be something that affects us in such a way that a lot of the ongoing skirmishes that have been going on for some time are de-emphasized and seem to peter out, that we finally start to get along. So a lot of really good to look forward to. So having said that, and even with a few minutes left, I think I'm going to step off because I am pretty talked out. And on top of it, it is my daughter Melena's birthday, and I want to get to her birthday party that is ensuing any moment. And we wish her the best. And yes, I assume she did her solar return meditation. I told her when her solar return was earlier today, so hopefully she did that and allowed her mind to go into all good places. And by the way, if your birthday is coming and you do know your time of birth and your place of birth and your date, that right before your birthday or a week before your birthday is the best time to have a reading, because there is your chart with the transits and the progressions, but there is a different chart called the solar return, which is a theme for the year ahead. And the time of your solar return is different than the time you were born. And so we use the solar return time as a time to meditate, visualize, and imagine what you want your life to look like for the next 12 months. So if your birthday is coming up late this month into August, then it's time to do your birthday reading. It's time to look at what your solar cycle has in store for you. All right, so again, if you want to reach out, 818-865-8770. My email is nnewmont@gmail.com. I will see you back here in 2 weeks. I really appreciate those of you that have watched the show tonight. I hope you have enjoyed this, and I look forward to bringing you more good news in the weeks to come. And remember, as always, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Thank you, Ed Hunt, back there. I appreciate you. And I'll be back in 2 minutes. With two weeks with Brandon Fravel. See, I'm frazzled. I'm talked out. Good night, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Thank you.